Morning, guys. Happy New Year. Welcome to the podcast. I've got Laura Buckley from Maryland, and she creates cultures where leaders and teams can thrive, and she helps clients do that. I'm really excited to have her on, and because today's talk is all going to be about leadership. We're going to talk about the science of leadership. We're going to talk about influence, and I'm really happy to have her on to add value to the audience. So, Laura, welcome.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, briefly introduce yourself and we'll dive right into the conversation.
Yeah, great. So I'm Laura Buckley. I'm a leadership consultant, which means I work with leaders to develop cultures where they and their teams can thrive. I always say where your people can thrive, but that includes you, right? Like cultures definitely starts with the leadership. I've been doing this for a long time now. I started my career as an Army officer. So I had a lot of opportunity in leadership roles right from the start of my career, definitely before I was ready. But I learned a lot along the way, and I transitioned into doing leadership consulting, training, facilitation, development about 15 years ago now. It's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. And one thing I really love talking about is because leadership, from what I've learned and studied, is leadership is a skill and everybody has a way of leading. And so you have a art and science of curious leadership and how it shifts the status quo. So discuss more about that.
Yeah, I think when we think about leadership, we often think about it from a bit of a command and control perspective. Where do you sit on the organizational chart? And then, as a result of that position, who are your team members and where do you have the people that you manage or lead? I think a lot more about what I call ripple effect leadership, which is really owning how we show up as leaders, owning our own authentic personality and allowing that to be part of how we lead, and being really curious about what does good leadership feel like to me in my when I'm being my most authentic self. How am I leading? When I'm creating that, now I'm creating spaces for my team to be their most authentic selves. But in order to do that, we need a high level of curiosity because we have to get to know people. We can't expect people to all show up and act the same way at work. We've got to spend time getting to know people and asking a lot of questions and understanding their motivations and their expertise and how they're going to contribute their best self. The only way to do that is getting to know people and being super curious.
Mm. And the follow-up question I have for you is how, for the audience listening, and there's this really great book around it's a force versus power, and you talk about how to increase your influence and lead beyond authority.
Yes, I do. I think a lot more about creating influence through trust
Mm. Mhm.
and through good communication and building strong connections. People really are loyal to people first at work more than they are loyal to organizations. And so when we're talking about having influence, when we're talking about leading other people, if we're doing it from a place of, oh, this person actually knows me, they understand me, they care about me. Oh, you're talking about caring about people at the workplace, but when people feel cared about, when they feel like they have relationships and friendships in the work, they're more likely to contribute their best self. So it's a very strong shift from I am your boss, so do as I say, to really creating strong connections where people feel drawn to doing the work and doing their best and feel like they have a safe space to actually do that.
Talk about a pivotal moment from your early leadership roles in the Army that significantly shaped your approach to leadership.
Yeah, one of the most probably significant I've learned from mistakes and knowing that times when I was trying to be someone I wasn't and then not showing up as my best self. And I probably have plenty of examples of that. But one of the things I really learned along the way was the importance of letting people know that you want to be in a leadership role with them or in relationship with them. At one point in my career, I was asked to manage a small group of people who had previously been managed by a different officer. And in our first meeting, one of the women said to me, "Oh, how did you get stuck with us?" And
Mhm.
I was like, wow, how many people feel like that? That like someone is leading them because they have to or because it's part of the job versus, no, I volunteered. I want to do this. Like I'm excited to work with you, to get to know you, to figure out how we can work best together? But when she asked me that question, that was, oof, oh my gosh, 18 years ago. It's still sticking with me. Is that question, they felt like someone was just going to get stuck with them.
Mm. Hmm.
And it's just going to be part of the job versus wanting to lead and being really committed to them as humans versus just people on the team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, reminds me of my days in residency when we'd have to take call, and there's certain tendings in certain residents you didn't want to take call with. In this kind of, we would approach it just quite the conversation in the same way as are you, but it reminds me of those days.
Yes, I know those days well because I'm a dietitian. So a lot of my roles, I worked in hospitals. And just like you're saying, like there are certain physicians or people who is like, all right, like I know what it's going to be like from day to day. And I know what's going to be a better experience because of how you're showing up. It's not about what you're doing, right? It's not about being the best doc or being the best leader or being the best, whatever technical skill you have. It's about how are you showing up in the leadership capacity? What is the impact you're having on people? How do they feel after an interaction with you or after an opportunity to work together?
Mm. Yeah, I love that. How do they feel? The other thing that's really interesting is in my days in the corporate world, it was just a lot of meetings, and a lot of my impression of meetings were just they were just very pointless. And a lot of the culture now is embracing that. It's like things that can be discussed in email and things like that. So talk about the art and science of meetings that move the needle. Are meetings, do you need to have meetings, or can everything be done more efficiently?
Yeah, I always tell leaders the very first question is, does this need to be a meeting? Because we are very much on default mode. Oh, we need to discuss something, or I need to tell people something. So let's have a meeting. People are so meetinged out. And every time I get on a meeting with somebody, they're running from their last meeting, right? It's, oh, sorry, I was just wrapping up another meeting. Or, oh, I'm going to be a few minutes. It's just like this constant, people are just like running from meeting to meeting, which for one thing, we're not going to do our best work in that capacity. If you're back to back, you're not going to do your best work. But when you think, oh, let's have a meeting, the first question you should ask, is there a different way I could communicate this? And I always say, if you don't need engagement from the group, if you don't need people talking, if you don't need people sharing their expertise in real time, then don't have a meeting. Send an email, send a recorded video, send a chat. There are lots of other ways to communicate that don't involve bringing everybody together for a meeting. And so I think really understanding what kind of participation you need in your time together is the biggest indicator of whether or not you need a meeting. Because sometimes you do. And I think, especially in the increasingly virtual work environment, it is important that you have meetings where people truly are talking to each other, where they're sharing their ideas and their expertise, where people have a strong understanding of what other people are working on and how their work is connected. In the virtual world, we even have higher challenge of breaking down silos and making sure that the work is interconnected so it can be most efficient and effective. So meetings are a great place to do that, to solve problems together, to bring diverse ideas into a room and do decision making that way. But if it's just communication, or if you're just having a meeting because you always have this meeting or because it's a standing meeting, then we probably need to rethink whether or not we need to have that meeting.
Yeah. And with along those lines, because workplace dynamic is changing with hybrid and remote work. And so how are workplace dynamics changing, and what can we do to stay ahead?
Yeah. So like you said, the dynamics, they are changing. We have a lot more virtual and hybrid work. We're seeing a lot of people now trying to return to the office. You know, I often say to leaders, before you make that big to try to get everybody back into the office, let's ask the question of, have we done what we can do to increase opportunities for connection, for trust, for collaboration? Because when I talk to teams, which I talk to a lot of teams where they've gone virtual, when I ask them what the best part is, they all say, I have better work-life balance. Most people do. I know there's always the blurry line between work and home, but a lot of people have figured out how to have more work-life balance. They don't have the commute. They can get in some exercise during their day. They can have their pet with them. There's a much higher sense of well-being in the virtual environment. But when I ask people what the challenges are, it is always the loss of organic connection and collaboration.
Mm.
And that really does matter in organizations. We have to know what each other's up to. We have to hear about what's going on in the organization. And when we're in a virtual environment, that won't happen by default like it does when we're office to office. We can overhear over the cubicle, oh, someone's working on that, or someone's in this call, or oh, I just popped by to say hi, and now I've learned this other thing. We don't have that. So before we say, okay, we just all need to go back to the office together, I think it's really important to ask, how can we maintain that opportunity to be virtual or hybrid and have that being, while also making sure we're creating good opportunities for connection, for collaboration, spending extra time thinking about communication. I was working with the CEO of a nonprofit yesterday, and I said, let's just think about what are the considerations that went into the decision, and how are you communicating back that to your whole team so that everybody knows, not just the people who might see you or have meetings with you. Because when we put a lot of intention around that, it keeps the team engaged. It helps people have that greater awareness.
Mm. And along those lines, we got Zoom and Trello and Slack, what are 3 small shifts to unlock thriving, happy, and highly performing teams?
I would say the first thing is pick your tool and don't add a whole bunch more, right? It's because you're right. We've got Asana, we've got Trello, we've got Slack, we've got chat, we've got so many tools. And one of the challenges I hear people saying is it's just gotten too chaotic. So if I don't know which line and channel of communication or project management tool I'm supposed to be checking, so I think those tools are so important, but having standard processes for how we use them, what goes where, keeping it as minimal as possible so that people can truly keep up and keep organized is really important. The other thing I would say is having really clear expectations around how often you expect people to check any form of communication, whether it's email or chat or Slack, and how quickly you expect them to respond. Because what I see a lot of people doing is, oh, I had a Slack message, I got to respond right now. And it's leaders. People shouldn't need to respond 24 hours unless it's an emergency. Know what's an emergency, know what's not. Give people space. Because if I'm trying to do my best work, but I'm also like turning to Slack every time I get a ping, it's going to feel very overwhelming. I'm going to feel high anxiety, high stress. It's not going to create opportunity for well-being. But if I know it's okay to walk away from my computer and take a journal and go work on something on paper and not respond to my email for an hour, that's okay. Like making sure we have clear understanding, because a lot of people default to, I must have to respond right away. Even if the leaders, I don't care, I'm not even checking my email right now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
just having really clear expectations can be really helpful.
Yeah. I love that. And one thing that I've been doing is just certain times, like you mentioned, checking things and closing the laptop at a certain time, just creating clear boundaries so that you're not always your attention is just scattered everywhere. Talking about just a lot of this is a business entrepreneurship podcast, but what strategies will help us integrate our work and our well-being, especially in this day and age of burnout and employee disengagement? Talk about that.
Yeah. I think the first thing is to know, what is your real area of expertise? What does your team need you to do? And what do we need to trust our teams to do? Right? Because when we know what's mine and what truly is the responsibility of the team, then it becomes a conversation of, is the team meeting expectations? What kind of conversations do we need to have to support them? Versus I'll just take it on my plate because I'm just going to get it right, or I'm going to do it faster. Really being able to know what really should belong on a team member's plate, and then delegating effectively and having those conversations to help people grow into their role versus just taking it and doing it yourself and overwhelming your own plate. I think that as an entrepreneur, which, I'm with you. I understand it, right? It's so easy to be like, oh, I could just do it, or I know exactly how I want it to be done, or we feel like it's all our responsibility. And it is truly, in the end, it is all our responsibility. But what we really want to lean into is trusting the people that we have hired to do their best work. And really you building our own coaching skills is one of the things I work a lot with leaders and mid-level managers, is making sure we have the skills to coach and grow the people that we've hired or that we've chosen to do the work, and giving them an opportunity to feel respected and for their own expertise and their own opportunity to contribute. And then being able to stay over here in our lane and focus on the pieces that truly are ours to manage.
Yeah, I love that. We have a few more minutes remaining. And how do you see the role of leadership evolving in the next decade? One podcast guest I had on yesterday, and she was telling me how like 10, 20 years ago, it was risky to start a business because you could fail. But her thoughts are in these days, it's risky not to start a business. So how do you see the role of leadership evolving in the next decade?
I think the biggest thing that's changing right now is that focus on human-centered leadership. I think we just have to really recognize the people, like the youngest talent coming into the workplace, they have a true desire to be appreciated, to be seen as humans, not just employees, right? And so really being able to lean into that human-centered, getting to know people, build relationships, let it be okay that people are having a human experience. We all have lots of things going on in our lives that aren't just work. So how do we support people? How do we engage people? I think that's the biggest shift. I think people will leave work environments where they feel like they're just a number. And so the more we can develop that skill, that people feel really connected from a personal level. Not saying get personal at work. I'm not saying we should start becoming like all best friends at work. But I do think honoring that we're all having a unique experience, that we all bring unique skills and talents and identities to the table, and really figuring out how do we value that? How do we have each person contribute at their highest capacity without creating a sense of just more and more go do.
Yeah.
I think that's really going to be a huge element of what makes a company successful in these next 10 years.
And how can people find out more about you and reach out to you and work with you?
Yeah, my website is laurabuckleycoaching.com. Super simple. I'm on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people. I love to just have conversations. So there's a place on my website to just reach out. No, I work with CEOs and teams. I do a lot of leadership consulting and development to say, okay, what's going on? Where can we make a few shifts that we're really going to help your culture shape up in the way that you would like to see it? But even beyond that, just having a conversation, getting to know leaders and what they're experiencing in this current phase, I'm always happy to just have a conversation.
Yeah, love that. I really enjoyed talking with you, and keep up the great work in the new year, and wishing you continued success.
Great. Thank you. So great to meet you.